What's up, y'all? On this episode of the For All Nerds show, we welcome Kieron Gillen, the legendary comic book creator that I stole everything from. And what's up, y'all? And welcome back to this episode of the For All Nerds show. As always, we are bringing you that heat. And tonight, we are welcoming back a friend of the show, family, the author, creator of such works as The Wicked and the Divine, Die, both the comic and the role-playing game, the graphic novel, We Called Them Giants, and the current hit series, The Power Fantasy, available now from Image Comics. Please welcome back to the spaceship, Kieron Gillen.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. I must say, when you list all the titles, I feel exhausted. It's like, oh wow, I didn't.
And I didn't even talk about X-Men, and some of the other stuff, because I didn't want to just be droning on and on, but yeah.
I've definitely reached a point where I've had a career. You know what I mean? Yeah. If I could just stop now, and it's like that's probably enough.
You've done some great work.
Yeah, I must say, you said exhausted, but do you feel accomplished?
I feel happy. Honestly, it's like kind of like one of the goals was always to have just a shelf full of books that I was proud of. And I've done it, and I feel very lucky. No, it's weird. I'm always trying to be. I'm very aware of how lucky I've been. In terms of to get to do the work I have been doing. So yeah.
Well, it's this is really interesting for me because 10 years ago when we met, I was just a pure fan of yours, and then we became friends. I can say that, I think. And I've now written a graphic novel. I want to make sure I don't want to get ahead of myself. And I've written a graphic novel
friends,
myself.
I mean, someone I know.
Sorry, mild acquaintance.
Some guy I see at Comic Cons every now and again.
We've met.
I've even been to one of your parties. I can even say that. Yes. And I've now written a graphic novel myself, Jimi Hendrix, Purple Haze on shelves everywhere. So I can say that we're peers. He's just like me. So how has this 10-year journey been for you?
It's been a lot, hasn't it? Honestly, 10 years ago, Wicked was just coming out. I mean, I was a bad stage of my life. I was really kind of imploding and started to pull myself together. There's 6 or 7 years of therapy in that 10 years. Which is really good for me. The work's been happy. I've got a kid now. She's 3 years old. I'll tell you something. I imploded when I was 28, about to turn 30. I did a book called Phonogram. I sort of imploded at 38, about to turn 40. I did Wicked and Divine. I was 48 last year, I'm 49 this year. I haven't imploded, at least as far as I'm aware. And that implies that I feel calmer, and not in a bad way, in a kind of way. I'm a bit more at home with being like whoever I am, and that I think comes across in the work a bit. At least I hope it does.
Yeah. Do you think that therapy had something to do with it? Do you think that affected your...
I mean, lots of ways. Just in terms of I eventually got my ADHD diagnosis in the same period, which I always vaguely knew about. So, but I'm better. Me and my wife are both better able to navigate our nonsense. You know what I mean? It's when things you might have once had an argument over, you have the argument, and then you immediately step back and go, okay, what actually happened there? And you can come back. You know what I mean? I'm slightly more bearable to be around. I think that's the best way of putting it. I hope I am. It'd be awful if I was worse.
Yeah, and that's funny because, not funny, but it's also in the same time period, I've also been through some of the same things you went through, with the losses of parents and things of that nature. And I know when I met you, I had no idea, that you were going through these things. And it's always interesting to me because people can just, come off pretty normal. I would have no idea that you were imploding at the time. I was sitting there oh my God, this dude's writing some of the best stuff I've ever read. And, he's cool when I meet him. He's a really nice guy. And so it's really interesting. And I'm really happy to hear that you're in a better place now.
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, it's you do. I mean, people just always put up front. You know what I mean? And also, it's easy to sort of keep on going with momentum. And in some ways, it's one of the worst things about the Wicked period was, as awful as it was in lots of ways, it was also great. It was one of the best periods of my life as well. And the contrast between how well the career was going and how terrible I felt mostly was interesting. I mean, that's kind of in the third year of Wicked when Laura's imploding. That's kind of what I was writing about. That's oh no, you've got what you wanted, and this is what it cost. And that's the kind of what the third year was about in terms of really trying to pick apart the unbearable tension of that. You know what I mean? But that's the thing about grief. It's invisible. People kind of forget about it quite often. In fact, one of the new things I'm writing is about something similar to this. And I ended up doing a load of research about parents who've lost kids in like horrifically young, and like how people end up treating them, and quite often there's the idea they might forget even, like, because they kind of just, it's not present for there. And that's the
Yeah.
awful thing about grief, is this, you're like going through something that's very personal, and the world just carries on. You know what I mean? Anyway, this has got serious. But yeah, it's just, you know,
I was planning to get there a little later, but you know, we got started early.
let's just go straight in.
Well, no, I mean, it's kind of good to, I don't want to say just get it out the way, but it's kind of good to just get it out, because like this is also topics that people shy away from anyway. And as Benjamin said, maybe we was going to wait for later, but it's kind of like, let's just put it out and open, because on our show, one of the things that we are a huge proponent of is obviously talking about your feelings, but really like therapy and the idea of negotiating the hard parts of life, right? Negotiating what does that mean and how that affects you, how that affects your work, everything about it. So like, we appreciate that you're even being open to doing this and expressing that. Like that matters to a lot of people. They don't hear that.
Your heart and your sleeve matters, I think, in some degree. Like, and I still think this, I'm quite a private person in lots of ways, but in other ways I'm not, evidently, by the last 5 minutes of conversation. But it's like, yeah, it's true. I mean, one of the things I really admire about Jamie, like McKelvey, my artist, my ex-friend, phonogram artist. But like, you know, online he talks about his ADHD constantly, and so many people have discovered and gone through their own journey by watching him and him talking as openly about things which are difficult for him. It's a bit like that. The idea that, you know, it's one of the few upsides of the internet in that you are less figuring your stuff out. You know, you can see people who do that and go, oh, right, maybe now I see myself in a different way. I did a character called Prodigy, who's an X-Men character who basically I did a kind of metaphor for him basically discovering his sexuality when his powers activated in a certain way. And it wasn't his powers made him gay. Oh, sorry, bi. What his powers did was he basically communicated with a lot of people simultaneously, sort of saw himself in different parts, therefore understood himself better. And of course, that for me, that was a metaphor for specifically like how knowing people and speaking to people and getting their perspective on life and how they feel about stuff allows you to better see yourself. You know, and that's one of the things, we're not alone. You know, that's kind of what you kind of hope art is. You know, it reminds us that we are connected in these kind of experiences, and while you're not them, you are things that overlap with them. I swear there'll be a joke soon at some point.
No, but it's like, and all of this is so real, because I tell people all the time, it was you and the previous writer's work on Young Avengers with Hulkling and Wiccan that really just changed my view on sexuality, on just life in general, like on love and expressing that, and how people should be free to love whoever they want. And that was just something, you know, that book really did that for me. So I always credit that. And, you know, it's just fantastic that you put this stuff out there and that you are so open with all these type of things.
It's also it's a privilege. When you must have had some of this in terms of like your writing, you know, like when you put your writing out there, people will find stuff and they'll come to you and you know, does that make sense? Because you are by as you say, you appear now, and you know, and especially like the sort of with comics, there's so few filters as opposed to like when you work with something a bit of a gap, like when I worked on magazines, or I think as you say, like when you work on television, people don't necessarily know you as well. But with comics, you're much closer to the audience. It's much more like being a band to you. That's why I always you know, all my comics about music to some degree. I've said that aloud. That's not quite true, but most of them are at least some. You know what I mean? Like you're very close, so you get to see that. So have you found it?
Well, this is the most frightening part of it for me. I haven't really told you this, but you know, giving you the book was like terrifying for me. You know, or no, you went and got it yourself, but you know, just that, like the fact that you went out and got it yourself was terrifying. But there was certain people that when I wrote the book, I knew that they would read it. You know, you, Joe Illidge, Young Guru. And then I wasn't sure, you know, I know there'd be other people who I've talked to, you know, other writers, artists, etc., who would read it. But you three, I could say off the top of my head, were people who I knew who were either in the industry or just very influential on me. And I knew that you would read it. And that was really terrifying. And then the other part, I was reading the Power Fantasy Zine last night, which is also brilliant. Shout out to everybody who's part of that. That shit is phenomenal. And they were talking about Matsumi in it. And they're talking about being an artist and putting your work out into the world and then waiting for people. So I mean, honestly, it's been fantastic. It's been like, I was really proud of Hendrix. So I was just waiting for people to see it. And so it's really nice. But then it's I don't know. It's every emotion in the world. It's like,
yeah,
I have this fear of not doing something else. I have a fear of, doing something good again. I have a fear of people still liking it, to this day. Like, cause I know a lot of people like it, but some people are like, that's cool, whatever, so it's all these different things.
I remember with Phonogram, like,
yeah,
at least when I was doing that, I was like, me and Jamie were, maybe less so Jamie, but certainly me, that if this is the only book I do, I've got to be happy with it. Not necessarily think it's good, as in, if I never do another comic again, this is a statement that matters. And I get the sense of that from, you know what I mean, from Purple Haze in that way. As in, that's the kind, you don't want it to be your only work, but you can see that, okay, I'm going for it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just me doing a standard action comic. This is my, I mean, there's something about, I remember my Alex de Campi, the writer, I was pitching something else at the time, a Phonogram, and it was a sort of supernatural SAS comic. It was good, I think. It had some really, the art was great. There was other stuff going on. But she said, this is fun pulp, Kieron. Do you want it to be your first comic? And I was a bit defensive because you would. And then I sat down and thought, no, she's right. I should, so I concentrated on Phonogram, which was, for better or worse, something that I could do. As something not, at least only I could do it in the way I did it. And I think you get that, and that kind of let's really, what can we do here? And it's exciting because you ideally want, and I tell you what, the irony is that's the best way to get a second book, I think. You know what I mean? Well,
I want to ask you so many more questions about it, but I will get to that too. But that was you hit it right on the nail, because one, I didn't really have a choice in this. It was like Mello came to me and was like, hey, would you like to pitch on this? So that was my first chance to do a comic. So I was like, hell yeah, I'd like to do a comic. And Jimi Hendrix is an opportunity I can't pass up. And so we pitched on it, and then we got it. And when we got it, I'm like, okay, that's how I kind of approach a lot of things in life, because I don't know, I like to do things all the way. And that was the other side of it. I talked to so many people, and I've read so many comics, and I've interviewed and I've reviewed comics. So I knew I couldn't put out anything that, all these people I've talked about their stuff, I couldn't have them reading and being like, look at this guy, he was talking all that about my book, and now look what he did. Trash, right? So I really was like, no, we got to go for it. And then, you are a huge influence on me. And so Wicked and Divine, the idea of doing something different and trying to push levels, and like I said, it was still my first joint. So I'm like, did we do anything? But that's, I was hoping to do things of that nature.
Yeah. It's like generally your first, I mean, look at Phonogram. Like, you're always learning when you're doing your first comic, but at the same time, there's so much stuff which you sort of see in Phonogram that it also works.
Yeah.
And I think it's exactly the same with the Hendrix. I think, there's a voice there, especially I'd say you're wrestling in a different way. Like, the way Phonogram works is that Jamie is, of course, clean lined. So I think one of the classic ways of doing like music and comics is to go impressionistic, or which we couldn't do. So we had to find different ways and kind of more modernist. And of course, you did it. You absolutely leaned into that. That's because it's often I can imagine Hendrix liking it. As in, Hendrix is somebody I always I listened to. He was like one of the first artists I discovered for myself. Like, I was 11 or 12, and I didn't really know the story that well until like relatively recently. And then when I actually got the story as well, it's like the level of nerd in Hendrix. What I mean? Like, and I thought he would have dumped the hell out of this. But then you got the idea, and especially how Hendrix impressionistically feels, because Hendrix is like, I remember like lying on my bed and sort of disappearing, the full body shivers kind of thing, and that's what Hendrix is, ecstatic and like, obviously I would never do. I was 11, so I didn't know anything about the level of drugs in the world.
Yeah,
but like that kind of the control reality, and that's of course the things which the visuals are handling there as well. Anyway,
and that was last on that. That was the first conversation I had with Tom Mandrake, and we both talked about how we didn't want to see a lot of squiggly notes floating in the air. We wanted to try and do music in a way that, if it hadn't been done, or just, a different, just try and do something different. Like, and I read, obviously Wick, and then there's this Jim and the Holograms book that I thought was brilliant, the way they showed music. And so we were just trying to do something a little different, and that would also feel like Hendrix.
Yeah, I feel strong. It turned out really well, I think. I would have been petrified, honestly. Like, a few times I've been like asked to do things or pitch stuff, and I pitched a Bowie thing at one point, and I kind of was glad it died on the vine.
He was like, what did I do?
Yeah.
I was worried about the big Hendrix fans, but it was like, I also approach things like whatever, man. I just got to do it. You know, you gotta go for it.
You have the opportunity, just jump into it. Just do what you need to do. And you went full throttle, so I'm really happy that you did because it came out beautifully.
Yeah.
Really,
as you mentioned earlier, it's like, it doesn't matter if people don't like it. I don't mean it about as that kind of it. You don't. That's about me to rephrase it. The people who don't like it don't matter. Art's about the people who do like you, and that kind of like it's like it's one of people who okay, let's be awful commercial for a second. It's people who like you buy your stuff.
Right.
So it's better that like it's the 1,000 true fans model. If 1,000 people like you probably have a career. If 50,000 people are kind of okay with you don't.
Word.
And that's one of the audiences are audiences in that way. Yeah.
Do people kind of like the power fantasy? I mean, I guess it's just okay, right?
It seemed okay. It seemed honest.
It's doing middling numbers.
I don't read the reviews and cut the best bits and stick them on the wall behind me.
Well, that's actually a real question. Particularly about power fantasy and everything else. Do you read the reviews? Like, do you at this point? Does that?
Well, I'm a recovering critic. I was like a critic for like 15 years, so I have a greater interest in criticism than most comic writers, I think, as in because I like the art form. And there's a bit like I can also read people in a different way in terms of like not even like what you think about me. I'm like, oh no, that's a bad argument. In some level, I feel like I'm criticizing craft more than anything else. But no, I don't read things closely all the time. At least I will probably skim down and just see the shape of it. Occasionally, I might read more, but mostly it's not written for me. You know what I mean? Like, there's a line Jamie McKell, so it's written for the audience, it's written for the writer. There's a line Jamie uses that all criticism, I will either tell you about something about you already know, as in, yes, I know it's padded here, or yes, I know it's cramped. I've killed myself making it happen, or it'll tell you something about the writer.
I did it on purpose.
You know what I mean? As in, there's a line that Wilde uses, which is basically all criticism is autobiography. And the argument basically is that when they're talking about the work, they're really talking about themselves. And not in a bad way, because that's what art is, that where they've been, where they're from, how they see the world. I remember like someone saying a Wictive, it might be a phonogram, these characters are promiscuous. And the fact they used the word promiscuous made me kind of know they probably
like where they stood in life socially. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so that
promiscuous.
Those two things. But occasionally, exactly, it's such a funny word.
They were having the sex.
Oh man, they were totally making out. But there is a tiny fraction of criticism which actually tells you something you don't know, which I find really, and it's a very small fragment, and it is a moment of like where you have failed self-awareness, and not about like I remember like someone writing about phonogram, Colin, too busy thinking about my comics. He was a blogger. He still occasionally does something, but something he noticed about phonogram, and he wrote like 20,000 words about phonogram. Bless him. Was that how ahedonic all the cast were, how completely lacking in pleasure in music, as in. Not the whole, as in the lead characters, they listen to music, but they kind of bleached the pleasure out of it for them because that's there's a fundamental sadness to the first phonogram. These are kind of like music critics or metaphorical music critics, and they've kind of got lost in their bullshit in that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was something I hadn't really thought about how the fundamental. I mean, and I kind of knew about it if I stepped back and thought about it, but the fundamental lack of joy in the cast, which only comes in right at the end when Cole smiles and gets over himself. That fundamental truth there. And occasionally, that's a really well thought out thing. But I always remember, like, Wictive, like a random one-line Tumblr post. And it was talking about, Laura's acting self-destructive because she's depressed. And she's been depressed since the beginning of the book. And I had my moment of, like, utter horror when I realised. I never realised I was writing her depressed. I was just writing her like me. And then you went, oh, no. You were depressed, Kieron.
Oh, no.
You were just depressed.
Oh, no.
You know what I mean? It's just like, you know what I mean? Occasionally, it's that fundamental. But most of the time, it's stuff you probably know. But the flip is, I said it's all telling them about themselves, the autobiography. That's fine. Like I'm interested in hearing people's response because it's about their own journey. And the fact we're all doing our own journeys and we can communicate for our feelings like this, I think that's worthwhile. So, and I think I do kind of read it.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. I think that, like, so far for me at least, I've learned more from people who like the book. Like you said, the fans that matter are the ones who really like it because they'll tell me parts. They'll be like, oh, this hit me. And I'm like, oh, that's great. That worked. And I'm like, oh, that's very cool that you got that reaction to it. Or they'll find something that I didn't even think about in the book. And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting that you were thinking on that level because I really wasn't. But, it works like that.
Now you see how Jordan Peele felt when people were like finding all this meaning. And he was like, it was just a bowl of milk and cereal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the parafantasy scene, the paracut, which is great. Google it, folks. It's like a 113-page zine of these people just writing essays or
Yes.
art and fan art and wonderful and they've just gone for it. You know what I mean? And I write work to be interpreted, and we bury stuff in there, and Casper puts stuff in as well. But just the nature of art, there's always more in there. You know, there's a line. I've got the guy's name. Brian Eno's cards. It's honor your mistake as your hidden intention. Which is a great one-liner, and I think about that quite often. In that kind of like, there are no mistakes. If you can make an argument and it holds up, you know, it's true of the work of art. The if it holds up is the key line, because occasionally people make arguments and it's like, I don't think this is true because of evidence on this page. But you know, that's part of the game.
You know, I'm actually curious, just the way you write. A lot of your work, not everything, but a lot of it, it's even power fantasy. You do the in medias res technique, where like you just drop us right in, and then I feel like we're always playing catch up. Like, well, wait a minute, where are these people coming from? What's happening? And I know that's part of the game, right? That's part of the story, and people putting the puzzle pieces together, and that could be quite fun for like avid readers, general fans of yours. But like for some people, that could be a turnoff, right? They want to be spoon fed, right? Why is that technique your preference?
It's tricky because it's like, I agree with you because that's very much people's response. But I always think that I'm actually, I think I'm dropping you in media res, but I'm explaining everything you need to know in context. I think, and I'm clearly wrong because people.
Some people are like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. They're like, wait a minute. So.
Yeah, but you're right. As in, like, especially with the fantasy, we're dropping into a very developed world with like 50 years of history, with people with existing relationships, and writing it as naturalistically as we can. And occasionally, you cut. A lot of it's just quite tight, small. Because I think I'm giving enough nods, and it's that kind of like when we're doing that opening scene with Etienne and Valentina in New York in the 60s. When our editor Katie was reading it, she was basically her fault. Things she was getting wrong. By which it means because she was making assumptions based upon it. So early on, it's pretty much like I have to do a very hot. There's a line you may notice of like Etienne talking about there being other atomics who are nowhere near as powerful as I am, and that was very carefully added to make sure you're okay. These two are different. These other people, So all those kind of just you've got to try to build enough to give scaffolding, even if the whole structure is not able to tell. Yeah, you basically you may not be able to see the elephant. You need to know it's an elephant. This is the irony, of course. Wictiv was the other way around. Wictiv had an elephant, was deliberately about making you mislead you. As in Wictiv was a story which was just lying to the reader across the whole 40 issues, or 50 issues, because it was about how stories lie to us. That's kind of what the theme was. So I wanted to basically, me and JB wanted to show how stories can deceive us and how we buy into these lies about ourselves and how we, and how all that. That's what the story's about. In this case, it's not. This case, it's specifically. That's how we kind of live through life, I guess. So I do my tilt my head, isn't I don't know. I think it seems to be the only way I can do it. Because it's like I want to be artful, by which I mean, graceful and write in these worlds and write these people naturally, with the minimum of exposition as possible. But at the same time, I try not to lose anybody. I mean, I always keep on thinking I'm being accessible. And then people say, "Oh, this is a smart person's book," and I'm like, "Oh dear, I fucked up again. Sorry, I messed up again." I was trying to be good, but yeah, there's part of me I just think it's naturalism. You know what I mean? Like,
okay,
and also
that's fair.
Especially with this, it is a bit of a tease, as in like there's stuff you don't want to know, and it's like, I think the thing is the stuff which clearly you don't know, but I'm hoping I'm revealing the stuff you don't know hard enough to make you know it's something we'll talk about later. When I've got stuff like when like Etienne goes, "Oh, of course, the second Summer of Love is the worst thing."
Like, you're like, well, what's the Summer of Love? Right?
Exactly. I'm hoping people go, "Oh, well, we'll definitely find out later." They're stressing that very hard, as opposed to them assuming, reading that and thinking, "I don't know what the second Summer of Love is." You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm hoping people. I expect that's what I go with, as in, I have faith in the audience having faith in us.
I see.
That's the, you know what I mean? As I believe in that holy congress of the two of us, forming something together. But fingers crossed.
I think it's also one of those books, and like, I mean, I've reread Wick a lot of times now over the years, and I think this is the same thing where it's you get more from the rereads, because even after I read Design, and one of them mentioned the Signal, and I was like, wait, the Signal, I missed that, and then I go back and read it, and there, at the end's like, oh yeah, and the Signal, I'm like, oh, there it is right there. So what the hell is the Signal, and what does that have to do with everything? And it's just that mystery that, what unfolds. But I feel like you say you've given enough information of the characters, and obviously most of the audience is agreeing and they're all along for this journey. But One question I did have, I want to start. We get into some of the philosophy of these characters, and in your view, what's the difference between being ethical and being moral?
Yeah, that was a big question for us.
This is a really good question. I literally feel my philosopher friends about to jump me because my brain has gone blank in terms of giving the specific definition.
I could give you the specific definition. This is what you pissed me off a little bit because I was like, "What's the difference?"
This is Tatiana's first.
This is one of my questions. When Etienne and Valentino are having that conversation, or not even conversation, when all the characters are really just expressing that he's the ethical one, she's the moral one. I was just going through loops, like, well, what's the difference, right? And I even opened a dictionary and looked, and what sucks is they cross-reference each other. Like the definition of ethics cross-references morality cross-references ethics. And I said, well, what the hell does Kieron think the difference is? Because it's clearly a difference.
I would say specifically the hand-holding, morals, ethics are about society, as in a set of rules which you agree to live by, and morals are much more like things you will do personally. Like that's kind of as in when Etienne talks about wanting to be moral, it means I want to be good. I want to be. I would rather be kind. Unfortunately, I merely have to do something what I think is for the society. What I think is societally quote unquote good. As in, like, okay, to pick one specifically, she referenced Kant. Etienne references Kant. Kant, of course, believes that all laws are basically. There's a word for this, but there's a special fancy word. Basically, it's just it is. Things are good or not. They've got to be applicable universally. You can't have a rule saying it's okay to kill everybody because I can kill whoever I want because that rule can't be applied equally. That's what morals are. Morals, it doesn't matter how to phrase it. Superman doesn't kill is moral in particularly how the book is using it. No, I just don't kill. That's the rule. Superman doesn't kill. That's what is moral. And ethical, in the case of Etienne, he's a utilitarian in terms of like the greatest good for the greatest number of people. In terms of like, no, I will kill if I save 1 million people. Easy. Or rather, I will kill to save somebody because that person has given up. If I have to kill this person, there are reasons why I might choose to do so on a reasonable level. And the problem with Etienne, in fact, the problem with the whole thing is that when you get to the question of is it better to just kill one innocent than the world live, you go, and a utilitarian would probably say yes. And that's the. And that the real problem of the book is the second you get to the scale of nuclear war, everything becomes ethical.
Yeah.
And that's the horror of the book. And I've got Etienne's a smart guy. He kind of knows this. And you sort of see the things he won't do, or at least he won't do yet. And that's one of the things I think drives the book in that also, when is Etienne telling you the truth? Because he would absolutely lie to you. That would be ethical. It's never this is ethical. In this situation, it will be ethical.
For the greater good.
That's always and of course the meta thing is the meta situation they're in is if we have a fight, the world ends. That's the thing that's always in this. I mean, one of the key points in issue 4, which I think is one of my favorite issues, is the when he's talking about I can reset your brain, or that I could help you leave Masumi, Isabella, if you want to. It'll be difficult, but I'll help you. And she goes, maybe, actually, no. Can you just help me? And she does the mind wipe thing. Because she's asked him to. The question I always ask is like, would he have helped her out? He's made the offer. Would he? Do we believe him? And that's one of the things. You know what I mean? Like, and I would like to think maybe we do. But like at the same time, because, maybe we do. Because, we've seen that he refused to immediately just kill the families of the people in issue 1. He decided, no, you're going too far, and I'm going to push back a bit.
Right.
But you know what I mean? That's the horror of Etienne, in that he's and he would agree with you. It's one of the things which is really buried in like issue 2 when he's talking to Masumi. He talks about Masumi's like, oh, you can't keep me balanced, can you? No, I keep myself balanced. He's mind washing himself. He's controlling himself emotionally. Because what would he be like if he actually could express? What if he wasn't essentially on psychic Valium the whole time? You know what I mean? Etienne's in an awful situation. There's a bit like, I don't know if I'll say this because I'm not sure if I'm ever actually going to write it, but like one of the problems that Etienne will say is that his powers are useless if anything happens. Like if the enormous poo actually hits the fan, it's too late for him. He can't do anything.
He said something to that effect, or that's what I gleaned from it in that later issue. He did say something to that point.
He's got to do everything in advance, which is why he's does the things he does, which of course is yada yada yada. I found it all fascinating. As you say, you mentioned earlier, it's like it's definitely read to be reread. That's one of the things I love about comics, in that since comics can be read quicker, you can read you can write for the reread more because it's more likely people will reread it. And especially with Wick, the book changed multiple times if you reread it at different times. And like, I don't think Power Fantasy is quite as I don't think Power Fantasy is as twisty as Wick Div, but it's still pretty twisty. But there's definitely enough that kind of like the fine detail will be there where people go, oh right, that has a different meaning now, or no, that's an interesting thing I missed, like the signal. You know, that's quite a big deal, but it's only mentioned in passing a couple of times in the first arc because it's not the Summer of Love. You know, the second Summer of Love is the big thing, which we basically spending 3 issues on in the second arc. It was going to originally be like an issue and a half, and then it was, oh no, it's going to be like 3 issues. It's ridiculous. Yeah. And Casper's killing on it, honestly. Like the pages, the second arc, like the first arc is kind of like everything getting on the stage again. Like, you know, we ended with the cliffhanger of the first trade. The first issue 6 is kind of everybody like panicking over what on earth are they doing, and then stuff starts collapse. You know, then people start making moves. So yeah.
Okay, before we get off the philosophy stuff, I want to ask: does Ferris Bueller not exist in this universe?
Good question.
Yeah, for me, whenever people start talking Kantian, Marxism, ism, Ians, anything, it starts, going in one ear to me and out the other, because it's just bullshit to me, honestly. A lot of it is like, it's just a lot of like men, coming up
justifying
with ideas
their actions
and justifying their bullshit.
Yeah.
And that, like, to me, most of the cast of the Power Fantasy comes off as some bullshit artists. Like, so far, I think I fuck with Hellbound the most, because she's just straight up, you're going to hell, and, that's something.
Got a strong ethical. Actually, there's a good example of an ethical code. Like,
I can understand that. Like, you are all going to hell. You know why
I'm here type of approach, right?
Got it. Understood. But Etienne comes off like the worst to me, and especially because of what you just said, the fact that he can manipulate his own mind. So that means like, because I was like, I deal with a lot of trauma in life, and I'd like to be able to wipe it off my head. But at the same time, I know that trauma and I know that stuff is what keeps me on a path, because if I could just wipe out certain things, I would be like, one, I wouldn't have the guilt, I wouldn't have the shame, I wouldn't have the fear of things happening to me. And then when he has this level of power, like you say, where he can pre-plan everything, he's got the eidetic memory where he everything. So he's dangerous as fuck. And then he's super dangerous because he thinks he's doing the right thing. And
he thinks he's right. He thinks he's right. Number one.
And that was my question. Like, because none of them seem to have seen Ferris Bueller in that famous scene that they, I feel like they all need to see. Because
also, like, I think how old would Etienne been when Ferris Bueller came out? I have to do the math. Like,
I wasn't here.
85. So he was born in 45. So he'd be 40, like 40ish.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, too late.
He might have missed it. And he's also quite a pretentious guy.
Too. Yeah. He's already on his path by 40. He's fucking a monster by then.
I think, I'm just chewing over what to say about Etienne. It's tricky because it's like, you write about the memory. If you actually, this is how you learn. The story hasn't said Etienne actually wiped his own memories. He probably could, but it's definitely said he could control himself.
Yeah.
So it's like, would you think it's ethical for me to actually not remember bad things I've done?
There's the real, there's the like,
I don't want to give an answer to that one because my immediate gut says, in terms of it, as an Etienne would say it's unethical for him. No, I have to remember everything I've done because otherwise I don't understand what's happening, and I don't understand actually I don't understand the moral things, what's going on. He won't necessarily feel the guilt. That's where he might stop.
That's where the lack of morals come from.
Not forgetting anything is hard for normal humans to deal with, though. So for because a friend of ours, Dart Adams, says he has that where he remembers everything in his life, and it's like, Dart's quite, a lot, and
go ahead.
Yeah, to be a omniscient telepath, whatever, have all this power,
I think you're mad that he has so much power and should have a responsibility, but doesn't.
No, I'm not. It's not that I'm mad. I just don't trust him. Like, I saw Kieron talk about how people, ascribing heroes and villains to various characters in this book. And to me, they're all villains so far. There is no, none of these people are heroic. And then something else,
you can't
like,
trust them.
It's like, even though we're dealing with this superpower thing, right? Their world is, I don't know if it's, better off. than ours.
No.
It doesn't
I mean, like,
seem to be.
certainly not for anyone in Europe.
Yeah.
No, right. I was just gonna
Not at all.
probably not, but
Zero chance
everything
of that.
seems kind of the same, right? Like,
But
the same
worse.
stuff is happening,
Yeah,
but
slightly
in different
worse.
ways.
Yeah.
Slightly, you think slightly worse? I mean, obviously the whole
Europe.
Eurasian landmass.
Tokyo
but-
ain't doing too well either, from what I understand, right?
So much for croissants, but they're
Oh,
gone.
man. It's like, so when we get to Isabella kind of takes the lead in issue 8. So Isabella talking about like specifically the ground level fallout of wiping out a continent or removing it, like how the diaspora works. Like there's a kind of running theme in the background. You sort of European stuff is a little fetishized, a little bit sad and distant. There's kind of like just that kind of, you know, Italian food is now means something slightly different when there's no Italy, you know, and all those kind of things. It's kind of built into the book. No, I'd agree, it's worse. And at least there's a kind of intellectual sleight of hand in the book, in that how to phrase this, like most of the world problems which are solved happen in lead to a similar result.
Yeah,
like what actual Valentina does in issue 3 when she basically averts the Cuban Missile Crisis, it's kind of what happened anyway. Like that's they came to the deal and that they removed that's actually what happened. She just preempted it and pissed everyone off. Like in 1989, we actually the Soviet Union ends, of course, in the real world.
I'm about to say
and
the
of course,
Soviet Union collapsed because it doesn't fucking exist. Like,
yeah, exactly. So we've kind of got the same structure, and there's two reasons for that. At least partially, the nature of the status quo between the different superpowers does a level of arrestment. Stuff can't really change as easily. Secondly, I wanted 1989 to sort of feel like a little bit like ours at first glance, and then the more you drill down, the more you kind of see. Because I think there are going to be some specific things which are different. My kind of broad way is the 80s were significantly to the left than they were in the UK, were in our real world, and then the 90s were slightly to the right. Like it's Republican presidents all the way through the 90s in our universe. Clinton was never president in our timeline. We haven't touched on this because it's not core to the book, but like it's like after the Soviet Union fell, the way it fell in this world led to more basic paranoia. Especially the fact that it was the vaguely left-leaning superheroes who kind of were responsible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, Valentina was popular on the walls in the 1960s. She's less viewed that way now. Like,
absolutely.
She's still pretty much. I don't want to say some really good stuff in issue 7 about how people viewed Valentina. I think. I say it's really good. There's an image. If the image gets in my head and I feel that it gets me emotionally, I kind of think it's probably going to get other people. So yeah, that flu is that. At the same time, it's definitely a push and pull between this is a different world, but also at a glance similar enough. But you can drill down. There's some positive things which are different, I think. But you've got to drill down to get them.
It's yes.
How to phrase this? The police are less brutal in America, for one.
Oh yeah, we've seen that. I mean, that's already been talked about. That someone is killing off the cops.
Yeah. It gives me thoughts of us like when you see the bad things, quote unquote, the bad things happening, TM, right, in this world. And I always feel like, well, if there's a superhero, they could just stop it, right? Or if I have the powers, I could just stop them, or I could get rid of this person, I could do this, I could do that. But then to see that actually play in this story, that's where I agree with Ben, where I'm like, oh, things are actually a bit worse off, right? Because I mean, I always tell Ben, like, if that was me, I would probably be perceived as a villain. If I had powers of any sort, I would probably perceive a villain because I would have the Etienne view of the world, right? And I don't know then how maybe people will not connect with the characters, right? Because they despise everyone or they have problems with everyone. And me personally, I have big problems with Masumi.
Oh, interesting.
I'm probably one of the few people that do not like her. And it's tied to that whole thing about the art. And this is, I understand being scared and fearful and all this other stuff. Her art, her feeling that her art keeps everyone else alive. I think that's the most horrible, individualistic, egotistical, like all the negative emotions you could think of. That's what elicited emotion out of me. Every time she was on the page in a frame, I had the most churning reaction in my stomach. Like I don't like that thought of constantly having to appease something or someone to avoid instant death.
It's tricky. It's one of the things that I agree. Like the horror of it's all about the Masumi issue. We call it the Masumi issue. It's really the Masumi and Isabella issue, because it's really about these two women. For me, obviously power corrupts or power reveals. They're obviously ideas which are in the story. One of the things I think Masumi is about is how power distorts.
Yeah.
And it's Masumi doesn't have to do anything. People have been treating her like she's made out of glass since she was 15 when she nearly destroyed Tokyo by accident. So it's that kind of like, there's a thing I've sort of read about people emotionally stopping development the age to become famous, because the second they become famous, people start treating them differently.
Yes.
And they live in this world where people they can't actually orientate themselves. And I think Masumi's a picture of that a bit. As in, like, I feel sorry for her. Like, I mean, the one thing I sort of disagree with, like, just think the art keeps the world alive, the art keeps her alive. It's just, you know what I mean? And by doing that, and that's in some ways beyond her control, because people aren't letting her. And like, you kind of hope that Masumi will grow, but they're not letting her. And that's actually the thing. That's the thing. Etienne, even as he does it, Etienne says, what he's doing. In that, I think true love will not, never be a great. She'll never be a great artist, and she's never going to have a true love because there's no truth here. But I can't ethically allow her to risk.
Yeah,
and that makes Etienne a fucking ass. I mean, honestly, like when we got the notes back from Katie, Katie said some very strong words at that scene. But like, I sort of get it. Like I want people to have responses to the characters and get angry with them. Or
she makes me angry.
Yeah,
but I understand it's like it's also very tragic because of everything you just said about how Etienne is keeping her in check. But it's still it's hard to negotiate both at the same time, and I end up just ending up with being angry.
I think in some ways, at least that's why I made it more about Isabella, and that kind of like not more about. As in, Isabella is because if you made the story go just about her, it'd be either kind of poor Masumi, and it would piss people off. I think it's like some people I want people to embed on Isabella because you're more likely to be Isabella in this world. Like,
absolutely,
you've got 6 in 8 billion chances of being a superpower, and you've got 1 in the 8 billion minus 6 of being one of these people.
Right.
And I think that's really important to the book as well. So yeah. I'm like, I've got one of my friends like Etienne. People have strong opinions about. Do you think anyone who obviously everyone hates Magus, but people come around to Magus a bit on issue 5 in that kind
of.
I
don't hate him. Actually,
I don't hate Magus either. Yeah,
I don't hate him. I actually prefer Etienne in all his bullshitting. I actually still prefer, and maybe that's just my mindset. But I get it, and I don't. You have good reasons. It's compelling.
It's like it's like there's a whole. I would imagine for me, I feel more pity for Masumi, but I kind of get it. As a part of me, I would look at. I would hate to be her. Not in that kind of like, and then in some ways that's the that's why it's quite. I that kind of almost like, would I be any different? Is the reason why I think we kind of come back to it. In that, how would I act in this situation? And as I often feel that criticism is autobiography. Stuff I have strong negative responses to. I always go, okay, why? Why is this really bugging me?
Why does this bother me? Yeah.
Well, I read a book relatively recently, and it was like it's a very highly acclaimed book. By one of Becky Chambers. I'll mention it because she's a very acclaimed fantasy science fiction novelist. But it was the one about the robot, the monk and the robot story, and the lead character bugged me to death. And I had to really dig into it, and I sort of realized it's about because I'm somebody who refuses to like. I would never quit. As in, I'm not good at quitting. I'm really very bad at quitting, even when I should. And the level of self-indulgence the lead character shows nauseates me. You know what I mean? And in some ways, you talking about that reminded me of me feeling about this. You talking about Masumi kind of reminded me about that. In that kind of why am I meant to be interested? Your pitiful annoyance that you can't make tea for people. Sorry, this book. Anyway, but yeah, it's all interesting. But it's for me, it's drama. Like that kind of.
It's super drama. I love it.
They complicate people. Like I mean, Games of Thrones is a good comparison. I was like one of the best sort of. You just want to see it shake out. I hope that's my kind of hope for it. Like, and it's a bit like the bear. I was wishing about not like the bear. No one cooks, but the whole it runs off tension. Like imagine the bear. Everyone had nuclear weapons. Like,
could you imagine Carmi? Jesus Christ! Oh my gosh,
it was so funny.
All of North America would be gone.
Yeah. The bear had been over in like 2 episodes.
Right.
But yeah, it's how I often describe it in interviews is that imagine if you and 5 of your best mates had to your 5 messiest mates had to live in a shared house. Jesus. And like you had to, and if you had an argument over who had to clean the fridge, the world would end. That's kind of that's the power of fantasy.
Not on exactly on that note, but still talking about Masumi and Eliza and everyone. We see her praying to someone, right? And then Valentina says she doesn't remember heaven. And then Masumi I don't know if she's talking to the kaiju or it's just talking to her, but it seems to
something.
It seems to have its own consciousness at the very least.
Yes.
So there's something else going on. Like, we know that these are the atomics. We know that, that they're Valentina starts it off. They all start popping up after them. But there's something else going on with Valentina, Hellbound, and Matsumi, right? There's more to it than just, and that also has to lead in. I mean, I know this is getting into it, but like, I feel like this has something to do with what the Queen is or where she's coming from.
I think a lot of the stuff, the larger metaphysics, to use the actual philosophy word again, like, the higher and lower structure of the universe. It's one of the things I wanted to do is that this universe is a place with set rules. Like, everything comes from a key change. Like, yes, we've got our magicians and we've got our atomics, we've got our like higher and lower powers, but everything comes from a single point in history, and that's where we divulge, and everything kind of originates from that moment where everything changed. And like, I make up the metaphysics. So there's a higher realm we're calling heaven in quotation marks, and there's a lower realm we're calling hell in quotation marks. And everything kind of bubbles up from the interactions between these systems. And there's one timeline between it. That's the other thing, as Magus explains. So I like to think the metaphysics holds together, and exploring it is definitely part of the fun. In terms of what's the nature of heaven and hell. Like, we kind of put on the timeline the pyramids descent into hell as issue 9, didn't we? Yeah, exactly. So like, we'll probably get some more hell there. But heaven and hell are classic things in philosophy. Like,
yes,
there's a reason why one of my favorite comparisons of the book got is The Authority Meets The Good Place. And imagine, like, I can see that, because especially I like The Good Place. It was a show about philosophy, but it's also a funny show and play. It's still a sitcom, not sitcom, sitcom. Whilst this is still like an actiony superhero comic, but it's also about these ideas and what is good, what is bad, how do these stuff interject? How can we make decisions? What is moral? What is ethical? How do we get, what do we owe ourselves and what do we owe the world? So that's what the book's about. I did like one of it, like, Etienne is Chidi from The Good Place, but if you could entirely annihilate all doubt, imagine if Chidi could turn off his doubt, what would happen? And part you might go from Etienne.
I don't see him as evil as Etienne.
Maybe that's the problem. If you could do that, maybe you become evil.
But maybe without the doubt, he does become evil. Yeah.
I'm not convinced Etienne's evil. I think, certainly he's only as evil as every world leader. That's an awful.
That's fucking evil as hell.
Yeah,
like statement alone. Well,
I think
he's only as evil as all the billionaires.
Exactly. I mean, the book's really about billionaires and world leaders. In that kind of, no one should have this power over people.
Right.
They do. Right. And now what do we do? That's kind of what the book's about. In fact,
that was my takeaway.
Etienne, bless his cotton socks, in the first issue, does say, "No, the ethical thing. We should exist. Unfortunately, we do."
Yeah, he's 100% right.
And then he makes up that bullshit. Like I said, it's all the bullshit that he's selling that kills me. Because then he comes with that, what if someone worse than me comes along? Motherfucker, you are the worst one. Like,
I gotta help you. You are the worst.
You've got to meet the Queen.
Right.
True indeed. Yeah. Okay, true indeed.
Yeah. But it's imagine like if only the Major existed.
Yeah.
I mean, him being meatballed was, I was quite happy about that moment.
I so love them. Honestly, like,
that's so disturbing. God,
I'm glad it disturbed you in a good way, as in like it was meant to be like just there's not much. There's no fighting in the book, but there's quite a lot of violence, and and the fact that we just it's got to live in your head, as in the physical, the body horror of some.
Oh, it lives. It lives, and it has grown vines, and it's in a corner of my mind that is now there and won't go away. Like, I know, like, there's some people who do things like that because they just like the gory horror, right? Like they just like just throwing that out there. I that's one of my criticisms of things like The Boys and stuff like that, where it's just like you're just trying to throw levels of excruciating violence at me just to see what you can do and what you can get away with. But obviously for me, the smarter choice is happening here in the power fantasy. And like that thought, like it's like, how do you even come up with a thought of what is the most outlandish way to rip someone from this, this physical plane, but in a way that just does not, like, you've never seen before? Like, what even goes through your mind like what? Like, you know what? Let's compact them into a ball. Like, it's just something beyond my understanding as how to get rid of someone. Dispose of them.
It's interesting. Like, I think one of the things that makes the book work or not for people, I should also say, it's a really ridiculously well-reviewed book. So it's like, it's reviewing like better than I could have hoped for. But like, I think the reason why it works for people is can they make the leap to, because it's not a hyper-gory book.
No,
like,
not at all.
Exactly. It's deliberately, but it's about the idea. As in, if you like, we're going to present this idea of something horrible, and it's going to live with you. And that's that kind of like, even people who like embed on the idea, these are real people going to destroy the world. If you buy into the concept, the book really works for people. And that's, I think, is the hard bit. Oh, you want to make the emotional leap across the chasm. It's quote Kierkegaard, kind of. Like, I'm going a lot of philosophy here, so like,
no, this is good. Me. It's a philosophy book at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. But yeah, like part of it just comes from that's a bit in issue 6 when was it issue 7? Like Misumi is talking about how she imagines. They're talking about imagining the end of the world, and like, and what it was like to grow up and sort of imagine that. I know one day, I don't know, heavy may tear a continent up, and I might see that. And that's what me processing, me living up, growing in the 80s, and we all kind of imagine nuclear war.
Same,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like that moment that, like, if I'm standing here and I look over here, I might see an atom bomb, then it'll be all be over. You know, and there's a bit of that, but you apply the idea to superpowers, and then we'll go, okay, what could you do, or what would the logical kind of side effects? And with the case of Heavy, he's a gravity controller. What would he do?
Yeah,
and it's that kind of like, and there's something horrible at the idea of just your. You know what I mean? This is the crunch of it. And of course, let's not forget Casper. A lot of it's Casper's choice as well. Casper's not somebody who likes drawing gore. He's very, very, if I did this with a different artist, I'm sure it would be much more gory. But as it is, it's much more about the ideas and the playfulness. I mean, as Casper puts it, for all its kind of smartness, it's also goofy. That's why I quite like the Good Place comparison. You know what I mean? Like
there is some playfulness in that.
Yeah, he turns into a meatball.
He does, but he kicks it off. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like a football. You know what I mean? That's a bit playful.
But then there's also the other side of it. Like, where is Heavy from?
Detroit.
Okay, so Heavy is
Midwest.
American. Okay, yeah.
I knew he was American.
I knew. I wasn't 100% sure on that because it was funny to me that it was like the Major, who is the most, Captain America, American superhero in a book about superheroes taken to their extreme, gets knocked off immediately. And most everyone else is besides Heavy, and that's my next question too, is not American. But this is superheroes are pretty much an American invention, and then we've done the most of them, I think, but this book is not featuring them.
Actually, Eliza is American. She just she just moved to London. We haven't really revealed that yet, so there's no reason you would think she was American. But she is.
No, I did know something, because that was my other question. Who is Eliza's boyfriend in that scene?
Oh, well, he's just a character. He actually comes up later, actually. Basically, Eliza's backstory is like issue 7 or 8. Like actually 7 or 8 together. So you get kind of like her, where she grew up, like her boyfriend who was dating, and it's that kind of why they're not dating anymore. Spoilers, ended it. They stopped dating in 1989.
I mean, yeah. If she honestly, can't cry, I don't know if dating is on the menu either. So
it's like Casper's sort of like he's drawing that issue at the moment, and it's a complete heart and sleeve romance of these kind of guys. So it's like, this is one of the things, like, you want to introduce the characters in a small way early, even though you say Eliza's weird because she's obviously a major character, but we've done very little with her. So it became a point like, well, we've got to kind of just start seeding her stuff, and we know stuff that's important earlier, because that there is I mean, that's what we said. That's like, her tragedy. One of her tragedies that she sold her soul, and she's her boyfriend died in 1989. That's the kind, and this and we'll go on that journey together. We'll sort of see that, and it's it's sad. It's just sad. It's human and awful. I laugh. It's just awful.
I love the laughter. It's funny.
And I honestly, like, when I talk about the stuff, I'm always cackling. But it's like, I always say, people say when they cry to my work, it's like, well, I'm normally the first person to cry over it, because if I have an idea and it upsets me, I go, oh, I'm definitely going to do that then. That, you're emotional. Like, okay, what gets me? But you're aware that some stuff just gets you more than it gets other people as well, that you've got your weak spots. But my forlorn bravery is like a thing that people doing something where there's no chance of winning and they do it anyway. That always makes me cry. or certainly,
Mm.
what Boxer in Animal Farm when they take Boxer away in the car. Like,
Oh,
the
God.
idea they've worked him to they've worked this horse to the death, and now he's too weak to break out the thing because they, that really. If I'm tearing up now, what I mean, there's something really just, unfairness. I know this is really the world is unfair. We all know this, but when you really look at it, it's just distressing.
Yeah.
Anyway, the power fantasy. So I must say, just because I'm cackling, it's like I don't want to get people at the idea. It's not I joke at things.
It's
but
okay.
I take things very, very seriously at the same time. The world is ridiculous.
I mean, these characters distress you. You've said in various interviews that Liza terrifies you the most.
Mhm.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons. We know why, and I can understand. Does any character, I mean, Benjamin and I, we already talked about who we love, who we hate. Does any character give you any type of joy, or does every character unease you?
I love them all. Okay, they all make me uneasy. But I also find something funny about them all. It's like even Etienne, the fact he's always walking around with his coffee. It's just funny. There's something just really funny about that. And so he just walks into the scene. Etienne was always the best dressed man in any. Like, honestly, him in his 1989 outfit is solid as well.
His when he shows up to the Matsumi's art, show, I loved his outfit there.
Yeah.
That was
thing.
Part of the reason I like him is he could dress.
Yeah.
He's a good
His beard is amazing too.
Yeah.
But like Casper drives Heavy, as Heavy's a bit goofy. The fact that Heavy's had some bad looks over the years.
Very.
That's the point. When he kills the Major, what's he wearing? He looks
I know his hair in that scene. I was like, yo, what the hell?
I did look at like Casper, dude.
What are you doing, bro? And that mustache, everything was like, no, this is terrible, bro. This is not a good look.
The small bits of joy to them, because they're people, and that kind of like, it's kind of you're living with your mates and it's a flat share. There's, I use that as a kind of apocalyptic idea, but it's also fun. You know what I mean? There's like the human stuff is why you fall in love with them, and all of them have bits of that. Even like someone as petrifying and humorless as Eliza.
Yeah.
Like when you meet her, there's just a kind of like even though you're going to go to hell, obviously it's a scary moment, but like it's also quite funny.
Yeah, no, I think I don't fear her at all. I think she's hilarious.
Yeah.
Like I'm not right, I'm righteous. Like that shit is, come on.
Like she's committed to a bit in an awful way. In some ways, like she's like an extension of various. I mean, like she's obviously my Catholic nonsense bugging me, and I'm turning the volume up.
Yeah,
but I don't want to say too much about Eliza, just because when she arrives, she's such a big part of the arc. Like I'll kind of say like 3 of the 6 issues are about her, quotation marks. Like even though like we've got I'm using quotation marks in there, they're also about other people. But like
just imagine her with this slithering voice, and that's why I love her so much. Yeah, like I'm not right, I'm righteous.
She's on. I do like that. She's basically our cover star. That she's the person the alternate artists always want to draw, and she's barely been in it, which is great.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, now there's something else we talked about when we were talking before, or when you were here last, when we talked about Die, and we talked about how Matt, when he's in the fantasy world, he still sees himself as black. And so my question is, does Etienne or any of the Atomics see their world through the realm of race or gender?
I think definitely. Like, in fact, Etienne, like at some point, Etienne's going to talk about stuff in a bit more explicitly way about his position. I mean, it's one thing. Heavy white dude is more explicitly pushing social revolution than Etienne.
Yes,
you know what I mean. Like,
and
Etienne doesn't like that. I think it's one of these questions that what would Etienne have done if Valentina said yes, or Valentina didn't exist? You know what I mean?
Right.
There's kind of like all these kind of questions I hope to be more explicit about eventually. In that, like, kind of like Etienne's basically sure he believes he has to take the bigger picture right now, but I think there's more going on there as well. I think that's probably the best way of putting it. I think Masumi is narcissistic enough to not necessarily think about race as much as she probably should have. You know what I mean? Like the fact she's been locked in a little, her little bubble means she maybe doesn't think about stuff as much as she should.
Yeah.
I think Magus is interesting as a guy whose family moved to London from. I'm just saying where I forgot where we actually decided. Indian. Let's just say Indian. An Indian diaspora. His stuff is, especially because he's basically doing like performance Cockney. His stuff is interesting, especially if like about class. I think there's a lot of stuff with class in Magus as well, and how that intersects with England. Yeah, all this stuff in my mind. So I kind of have a better. There's more developed than the page, but I do find it is interesting. I would say, like, you can imagine someone asking Etienne, do you see yourself as black? You can imagine someone asking him that if they were very brave.
Yeah.
So they would have to be very fucking brave. I think about it. But yes, and like, I think Etienne definitely does. And I think it's quite important to him.
That's interesting, because my first thought would be that he doesn't. But
like,
I think I need to see more. Yeah, because like my first thought is that he doesn't, because he just seems so above it all. But like you said, he's looking at the bigger picture right now, and then I guess he'll get to the smaller.
There's a bit like
that goes back to that. He feels like a billionaire to me, where it's like, oh, I'll get to that eventually. You know, no.
Yeah. I think 100% the billionaire of it is very real. Like, I think in some ways the billionaires. I'm going to pause. It's not obviously a one-for-one metaphor, but there is a bit of the fact that I haven't got time. Me to actually consider myself as a person is a privilege that I do not have right now, which is a fucking depressing sentence to say. Sorry, like, you know what I mean? I think I think if Etienne had to say that, as in, that's what he'd probably have to say. But I also think that there's more stuff in the mix there as well. Like, I don't want to say too much until like he actually gets to speak, because like when he actually gets to sort of talk about the specifically about like what world he's talking about saving the world, but he doesn't really say what the world he would want is, or like why does he think the world is worth saving even, like I think Etienne is petrifying, and also like how high in his own supply, and also emotionally stunted, and awful. I think Etienne is also a tragic character. They all are. That's what I do. I was thinking this on the way in that in a different kind of story, I think they would all be superheroes, because except possibly Etienne, because when you're utilitarian, you tend to become, in comics, you get pushed towards, because
Etienne is very Lex. Etienne would push towards Lex.
The problem with the superhero universe for people of utilitarian is that utilitarian doesn't work in superhero, because superhero is a fundamental moral story.
Yeah.
They believe that it's the right thing to do on some, even like something like the Punisher. It really believes it's got. He
really believes morally.
It actually believes that you can just go around shooting people and you won't hit civilians. It's not. It's just nonsense. But like, you know what I mean. So Etienne's the one who might end up be a villain, just in the same way Xavier ends up as sort of inching towards the villain if you carry on writing him. But everyone else, at least, their hearts are mostly in the right place. Unfortunately, they're in a world where power distorts all level of, yada yada yada. So yeah, it's awful. No, I think Etienne as far as I can tell, Etienne takes it seriously, because I think he could do a lot worse things than he has if he wanted to.
Oh,
and
definitely.
That's the Petra thing.
He also reminds me of like any famous musician, because he's someone who gets this power at a very young age, and like you said, after that, that's why I always tell people like, a lot has come up of Drake lately, and I'm like, dude became famous at like 19. And so it's like, that's where it's going to stop.
That's where you've emotionally stopped.
Yeah, that's where, and actually I was really talking about Usher recently, because I went and saw an Usher concert, and that's when I was like, oh man, this man is not grown up. But then I had to think that Usher became famous at like 14 years old.
Right.
And like dumb famous at that. And
like rich. Huge.
Yeah. And so, and yes men after, for the rest of his life after that. So Etienne has that worse, where he has all the power. He sees everyone's thoughts. Everyone could be, kissing his ass, or just, it's like not even kissing his ass. He knows what they're thinking. So no matter what, he's hearing their bullshit inside their heads. And yeah, I can't imagine it. Like all these characters are very tragic.
In some ways, Etienne's like the opposite. Like, he does know what people are saying. He doesn't live in the bubble at all. He knows what people really think of him.
Yeah.
And that's he's actually the opposite of Masumi. And that, Masumi is trapped in a bubble. He's like trapped with, oh no, I know what every single person on the planet really thinks of me.
And that's a worse bubble, maybe, though.
That is like, yeah. And
if you have self-control, is it a worse bubble?
Good question. If you make, yes, I think.
Imagine being on
the
Twitter
point is right.
all day, constantly. Like constant updates.
You know that line he says in issue 4. Like, I don't think much of what critics think of me. That's it. Like, he literally doesn't care what critics think of him, because he chose them not to care about what they think of me.
Right.
And see, but that goes back to that emotionally stunted. Like that goes back to that bubble, because once again, like if he's choosing not to care and choosing not to hear, the criticism doesn't matter. Like that's a wild, like fuck criticism. I've got all this power too, and I don't care what you think about it. Nah, this dude's
I mean, what you gonna do about it?
Path, fam.
What you gonna do about it?
Like, honestly, it's so like I would love to like come back and talk like at the end of the second arc or like, the third arc, because it's like the different perspective. Because for me, it's like I said I know the characters. I also discover the characters. The writing is about like when you stop mashing them together, you kind of realize, oh, then they would think this. But it's stuff like, okay, what would when it's writing the Second Summer of Love, it's like, okay, what is Etienne doing when the world's like, and he can't really do much. And it's like the line I'll just start turning people's pain receptors off, so like they can die in peace.
Says, yeah.
That's what I mean. That's kind of like, I can't do anything to help. I can just help people,
feel better,
die as painlessly as possible.
That moment,
and that's kind of like, and that's quite a good thing, I think. But but I didn't realize that until I was writing the scene. Okay, what would Etienne be doing? Because what could he do? As well, I guess people die peacefully. That's all about. Like, maybe I can help people connect, make her do this. But you know what I mean? That kind of thing is the stuff you discover when writing it. Which is why it's fun. You know what I mean? Like, at least for me, you get to know these people and you kind of sort of see their delusions. And like, you want to take them on a journey. For me, like all my story, like you've read Wicked, like Laura's like 50-issue journey to become the person she's at the end. And it's like you this is definitely my Catholic stuff mugging me, as in like my kind of heroism as a state you aspire to. Like it's a state of grace, it's something you try to achieve. That kind of, that's the idea that we learn, and my story's always about people learning to be different. or not, and being villains. It's like the people who don't learn are the people who are generally crushed by my stories. So we'll see.
I love it. I just, again, your laugh, it's like the knowing laugh, and then also like kind of maniacal a bit. But I think that's what makes your writing so brilliant, because you just allow it to happen. And what you said earlier, just like trying to just bring this all home, like what you said earlier about how you write those characters, or when things kind of hit you emotionally, that you're probably on the right path, you should include that. I think that also, just from a creative perspective, you're giving people kind of thoughts of license, like have some courage, right? Like the things that scare you the most, the things that are different, the things that you are not really well versed in, or the stuff that makes you the most uncomfortable, perhaps you need to put that in there, right? Like that's the things that are most compelling. Those are the things that give you that actually make you grow more, right? As a person, what they say, you keep practicing, you keep doing things that you don't know, you jump into the new, and that's how you get more experience. So, and I do like that you seem to take that approach to everything you do. And and I think that's very strong. And it's also a good lesson for other people, just even no matter what kind of artist they are. I just think that that's a good approach.
Yeah. I said, like, I think it's the emotional commitment is important, in that I kind of say broadly.
Yeah.
And whatever that means is different for everyone else. And it's that kind of, you saying that was reminding me of a line I had Baal say in issue 4 when I introduced him. The whole kind of like, what reason why people like Baal is that allows people to sort of see the dark. Baal was somebody who wasn't afraid of like the awful stuff, and of course he actually was, like beneath all. But why they liked him as an artist was because just the kind of they could see the terribleness, and he was upfront about, this is who I am, in different ways. In fact, and Baal was always much nicer than he presented himself as well. That was the thing about that was Baal. Baal wanted to sort of like intimidate people a bit, and he was the most dutiful, kindest, self-sacrificing guy in the whole story. And that's the for example, Baal's a great example of me knowing where a character's going and writing it all the way, and upsetting me. Everything about Baal's upsetting, because he's probably like, for me, he's like probably the most classically Greek tragedy character in the whole thing. He's a hero with a great hubris, or like a fatal flaw, the hamartia, I believe it's called. The and the idea, his is, he was my kind of interrogation of masculinity, in terms of like, to be a man, you must do these things and live up to these ideals. And in the end, he's broken by the inability, be the lie that is that thing we tell people. Anyway, the other thing about another reason why I cackle, by the way, is that I do know like where Baal ends up. So or like, I do know, like in Wicked, there's a twist in issue 33 which changes everything. So like up to that point, I'm always like slightly maniacal, because I'm out of I'm further up the timeline. And I'm just trying not to say giving the game away, and like,
You are so good at that though, because we did the interview right before. No, it was like, well, I mean, I don't want to spoil too much of what Dave, even though it's old now, but it was right before the hope returns to the book, I guess. And I'm sitting there talking to you about, is there any hope for these characters? And you're giving all these answers, and eloquently
no.
and speaking all around it all, but it was
Yeah.
just the way. And then like an issue or two later, I'm sitting there like, oh, well, yeah, there's a lot of hope left.
Yeah. He's
But
like,
you
I
definitely
don't
covered
think
it
you
up so
know.
well.
Yeah. Yeah,
There's a
no,
lot-
it's fabulous.
Yeah. There's a line I put this when I'm signing Wictive. When I'm signing the first volume, I kind of regularly put "it's going to be okay" in it.
Mhm.
That's why I signed all the way through, and that's the closest they gave to sort of giving away that it's not quite as bad as it looks. And of course, Wictive's a meditation on the concept of "okay" in quotation marks.
No, I
As in,
know,
like-
because I told you before that the book didn't hit me until, it hit me. I loved it, but I didn't get it, until my mother passed. And that's when I really got the book, when I was like, oh, okay, it's going to be okay. I get it. I get it, because I heard that, we talked about this before. I heard that so much after she passed, it's going to be okay, Benjamin, it's going to be okay. I was like, fuck, no, it's not. It's like, stop fucking lying. And to this day, it's not okay, but it's okay. So, you get it. Yeah.
It's like that's it. So much just comes from what people said in there and thinking about what those words really mean. And it's pretty much the last thing I remember my dad saying to me, "Oh, it's going to be okay." I can't help thinking it's going to be okay, and my brain going, "No, it's not." Yeah. and what gives me, as you say, like it's like it is okay and it's not okay, and okay is a word that contains many things. Actually, it makes it a nightmare to translate. Like the French translations are like, because okay in English is a word which has so many different meanings, means we can do what we do with it. But like other languages don't have the word that does the same thing. So the whole it's whole semiotic
What's
house
Spanish?
of cards.
Did they say claro? Did they say claro in Spanish?
I genuinely can't remember. But like, especially because I should actually tell the translators this word is actually Wictive taught me, but like if I ever do it again and a word is that loaded semiotically, I have to tell them, hey, first trade, this word doesn't appear important, but it's the whole thing, the whole series hangs off this word. Good luck.
All right. Well, you have survived the interview segment once again. But before you get out of here, we do have our BRAP segment, our rapid fire questions. So are you ready?
Hit me.
What character's death in any medium struck you the hardest?
I tell you, let's go back straight to kids. Let's go to the primal ones. I remembered where a guy, Transformers comics in the UK, a guy called Impactor. Impactor is one of the Transformers.
Talk about this before.
Yeah. He is an original comic he was original character in Target 2006. He's basically a guy with a harpoon for a hand who leads the Autobot commandos called the Wreckers. And he gets shot in the last episode as he pushes the leader, Zarwan, out the way and gets hit by this complete arsehole. And he gets shot and he dies tragically in the arms, saying, you always were a wildly old buzzard. And then his head flips over. And I cried like a effing baby. I was 18 years old. No.
I was 18.
No, I wasn't. I was much. I was like 10.
I was 22 years old.
I love that joke.
That was last week,
and that made me that I found really upsetting. Like, and then he came back in a later comic as a zombie, and then took eventually like a zombie robot, and then he managed to take control of his body again, and then at sheer willpower, and then died again because he was that kind of robot. Died heroically.
You're a failure. How could you come back from the dead and you didn't make it? You failed.
He stopped the guy who saved the first time from going into like a. It's basically just the end of like Star Trek 2. Basically, he went into a radiation chamber instead of the leader again to turn it off, and that died. So like he would just constantly sacrifice himself. The that's the thing. It's like that kind of stuff. Said heroic sacrifice.
Yeah.
Gets me every time.
This is what a villain would call a fucking idiot. Like, how many times? Okay, here's another one. If you could have a theme song play when you walked into a room, what would it be?
Oh my god! I wish you just got the circus theme tune, which I think would actually, sadly, be the correct energy for me. Like I could pray for something a bit cooler, but the idea of like, who is it? Who is this clown? Oh, it's Kieron.
That's so great though.
That's hilarious though. Again, completely throwing people completely off because that's not you.
What would you do?
It's not.
What's your choices?
That's the same one all the time for me. It's Missy Elliott's, and it's for a particular reason. It's Missy Elliott's "She's a Bitch," and it's not because I feel like I'm a bitch or anything like that. It's because I think it's one of the most hardest songs ever, just in terms of the energy, in terms of the beat, everything about it. It's just it's kind of a very domineering type of song, but like when you actually get to know me, you're like, oh, she's cool. So yeah.
For me, it would be Outcast Elevators because I wished I'd walked across. When I graduated from college, they let you choose a song, and I didn't choose anything. You know, I'm a DJ, and I was like, oh, no, I don't need music. You know, and that was like because it's so much cooler than I am personally. You know, the song, and so that's just like, yeah, that'd be, you know, if I could get that level of cool, yeah, that'd be perfect.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
If I was like, imagine like me walking to Amory's one thing, but like I'm not that cool.
Oh!
Like, you know, like it's got, you know,
like dancing. It's giving very Spider-Man 3. I don't know why. As soon as I heard that, I was thinking like walking in like so funny.
All right, let's see. If you could have any one superpower, what would it be?
shape changing.
Oh.
It's gonna be like Odo from Star Trek.
Like Mystique, shape changing?
Yeah,
Like,
sort of mistaken. You know, like just generally like I quite often just want to be different. It's okay. It's kind of gender messiness, I think. So like I think it intersects with that. But yeah, that'd be the one I would pick.
Right.
Yeah,
not in an impersonating people way, by the way, I stress, not the creepy shape change.
I was gonna say
no,
that
would be unethical, to quote somebody.
just the quote heavy, just the freaky sex shit. You know, that's what we keep in front.
That's talking about like liking characters. Like heavy is that as an of course there's weird. You know, the fact is the breakfast scene's hilarious, and we're honest about the weird sex stuff. It's our sequences. You know what I mean? That sort of shit's fun.
I don't like heavy, but out of everyone besides Hellbound, he's probably my favorite. I just feel like he's just he's like, I love, you know, like that was probably the first moment when I fell in love with the book, was when he got blasted by the laser and then immediately put the joint back in his mouth. Like I was like, heavy, I can understand. You know, I can relate. I can relate to that man right there.
When Casper added the floating spliff to the character design, it was like, no, that's it. You know what I mean? Casper, you've got it. You've absolutely got it.
No, I was like, I relate to this man right here. And then you also said something about how gravity powers are unused enough in comics. And
correct.
There was a Graviton. He fought the West Coast Avengers, and there, you know that, and it terrified me. And he was talking about like the four fundamental forces of nature.
I've read this comic.
Yeah, and I was like, yo, this shit, you know. And so when you said that, I was like, nah. He's right, and gravity is a monster if you know what you're doing with it. Like that's you know, that's a power.
Yeah.
Mm.
No. I think Graviton was on my mind actually, because I read him in that comic as a kid. Like I never had many American comics. I read that one. I was like, this guy's really interesting. And then of course I discover when I get back into it, he's a random nobody. It's like,
yeah, but he wrecked the West Coast Avengers in that issue, like wrecked it with no problem.
Gravity powers are actually very terrifying to me. Jesus Christ. Yeah. Like you're on Jupiter all the time. Who was your first geek crush?
Oh my god! I'll go to the one that was immediately in my mind, even though it's not quite like. I think that generally your first answer is the best answer.
Yes.
So, Commander Makara, who was in a what's it called? Starfleet, which is like a French-Japanese puppet show, and it's basically a load of puppet. Like, she was the evil leader. And she had like a very cool helmet. This is also Jamie McKelvey's first crush, I think. And a helmet and a little man's eye. It's a man's face as an eye patch, like this, which could occasionally speak itself. So honestly, prototypical Eliza Hellbound. Now I think about it, in that kind of like that very sang-froid. Is that the right word? Like but that level of slightly distant, aggressive, cool woman. And it's like, yep, that's certainly one of my types.
Yeah, mine
slightly scary. I could do that.
Yeah, Dark Phoenix was one of my first ones, so I fully agree with that right there. Like, yeah, slightly, you know, and it was Dark Phoenix crushing Colossus with her hand, where I was like, ooh, you know, like
petrifying in a good way.
Do that to me.
Treat me like the broccoli people.
Yes. All right, Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars has given me more money.
I love the honesty. So
you know, they've paid for some food, and that means they're automatically best. Actually, I think it's Star Wars anyway. I mean, I like them both in different ways. You know what I mean? But like, Star Wars was my first. I took my first entry into nerd world. It was Star Wars. The first movie I saw was Empire. You know what I mean? So like all of that area is very formative.
Okay, this is gonna be the last or second to last. Name something that you love that most people don't. Could be like a movie, a food, A person, a character, anything.
Myself? No, I don't love myself.
I think people like you, Kieron, so you can't answer that.
Some people on the internet, you'd be surprised. There's got to be. I suddenly thought my life is entirely like all my tastes are utterly banal. I really can't answer this question. That's hilarious. Like, imagine half the terrible music I really like. Like, what's really bad and I like? So I've got to go quite low down the scale because I'm thinking, no, a lot of people like that, but in reality, most people don't like that.
There, see,
it's like Joanna. I remember playing both me and my wife, Joanna Newsom, who were both big fans of, and we had a music over the dinner table or the dinner section at our wedding. So we're playing that, and it's of course over half. And I remember one of my uncles saying, "What's this interesting music, Kieron?" A lot of people like Joanna Newsom, but like let's say Joanna Newsom because someone might go and listen to her.
Okay, that's a good one.
What is your favorite superhero movie of all time?
Ooh. Oh, this is one of those questions I always cheat on. You know what I mean? Because I will say like people say superhero movie, and I'll probably say The Incredibles. I think, oh no, I mean a comic book movie. Then I go Itchy the Killer. You know what I mean? Like I will deliberately bounce on the question.
Well, those are both two great answers. So
they're both great movies. Like,
they're valid. They're valid.
I think The Incredibles is if talking about a classic superhero movie, I think The Incredibles is great. I still haven't watched this I haven't watched the second Into the Spider-Verse. But I watched the first one and it was so good. You know what I mean? Like I watched that and it was like I'm a pretty hard, I'm really genuinely strong. But everything everywhere all at once is a superhero movie in a real way.
Yes, correct.
In terms of that, it uses the grammar of the form. That is a mind-blowing movie. In a way which is humbling.
I think RRR is a superhero movie.
I haven't seen it.
Yes.
Oh God, you need
please
to
watch it. It's still on Netflix.
Yeah, it's still on Netflix.
Yeah,
you need to.
It's on the list definitely. It's that kind of 3-year-old who doesn't.
I get it. But that is, and it's a 3-hour movie, so it takes its time. But
you don't feel it. You don't feel the.
No, it's God. I've seen it. I don't know 4, 5, 6 times now. I've watched it too many. Yeah. Oof, that's a great one.
All right. So that is the end of the wrap. Thank you so much, Kieron. You were fantastic. You're so funny. I think this is the longest I've gotten to talk to you and just be able to just kind of probe your thoughts about how you create. And I think it was been really good. Can you please let everyone know where they could find you, where they could find your work, and anything else you want to plug?
Well, firstly, thank you. I'm easy. Enter my name Kieron space GILLEN into any search engine of your choice, and you'll find me. Like the best place is my newsletter, which is on Button Down. Follow that, and every week or so I'll send you essays on what's out and what's new, and links to everywhere else. I'm on Blue Sky Socially, where I'm mainly posting nonsense. I do bad puns. I'm still at the moment on Instagram. My Instagram stories are mainly about me posting baking because I've started baking a lot and people seem to find it entertaining. Though they were very rude about my icing on the internet.
Are you watching all the baking shows?
Great British Bake Off.
I don't watch them because actually the aforementioned lack of time, but I do enjoy it when I can. And that's basically my newsletter is the best place and links to everywhere. If you like the Power Fantasy, there's a Power Fantasy primer I did, which is it's linked in the newsletter. It's bit.ly/the Power Fantasy, and that's like 51 pages of preview art or introductions to the story and links to where to buy it and actually also links to all our socials. So like and the trailer. So it's actually a really nice thing. So that if you're interested at all, go nose and thank you.
And no, thank you very much, man. It's always a pleasure to have you here, and to hear that you enjoyed Hendrix is that made my year. So thank you so much for that. I'd love to talk to you more about it whenever you have time, but for now we'll definitely have you back around for the second arc or so we can definitely talk more about this book. And for everyone else, thank you for joining us. We'll be back soon with another episode of For All Nerds, and for now we're out of here.
Hey, what's up, internets and the fan fam? This is Tatiana King for All Nerds, and I want to thank you so much for listening and watching the For All Nerds. Make sure you like and subscribe to us only on YouTube.
For All Nerds Show is a member of the Loudspeakers Network, where we always say rest in peace to our founder, Combat Jack.
For All Nerds Show is powered by our listeners. Everything we do, from our podcasts, live events,
our website are all independently funded. Please continue to support us through our Patreon page at patreon.com/ForAllNerds.